and welcome to the pre-recorded version of the Industry 4.0 Community Podcast for Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. I am your host with the most, Walker D. Reynolds. The Industry 4.0 Community Podcast is put on by 4.0 Solutions. Today we have Zachary Scriven and Vaughn Turner are back with us today. And we're going to be covering basically three topics today. Obviously, we won't have any community engagement. We're not going to have any interaction. I'm actually traveling internationally, so I can't do the podcast live on the 21st. That's why we're pre-recording it. We're going to be doing three topics today. Number one, we're going to touch back on what we had talked about in the last podcast, which is, what if we did a startup? What if we created a company and we documented it and we did it for the community and we made it Industry 4.0 related? We're going to talk about that today. Number two, we're going to go over a conversation about MQTT and OPC UA, actually a pretty good technical discussion that was in the Discord server. And then I'm going to respond to somebody who works at Schneider who made some comments about interoperability and some of my harsh language I used about Schneider in the Siemens still has a long way to go video. Okay. But with that, let's start with announcements. Those of you who are in mentorship, you already had your class last Friday. So forget that. We're not going to put that one in the announcements here. What I will say is that the last mastermind session, which was 2 weeks ago, and the last mentorship, which was last Friday, was the very first of our cooperative virtual factory of the future. So we're actually digitally transforming a virtual factory in 2023. We had our first planning session with the mastermind group in February. And then we had our first, we gave our mentees their first deliverables to develop in the last mentorship class. And in the way that the session went in mastermind was actually really good. We're having an opportunity to define our process. So our process is our facility is a batch facility. We're actually just converting one area. We're using classic batch mix extrusion drying process. So which you see it in food and beverage, you see it in lots and lots of different places. We're actually digitally transforming that environment, and we're using examples from real processes that we've actually seen with our own eyes and some of the problems that we've run into in those digital transformations. So instead of building a demo that comes out of like a perfect world, what we're doing is we're building a virtual factory based on realities we've actually seen on the plant floor. So it's actually going really well. And I'm super excited for how it turns out here in 2023. Bootstrapping your digital transformation process workshop. That's this Thursday. So it'll be 2 days from now when you're watching this, February 23rd at 10 o'clock to 2:30. I believe all those seats have been sold. So I don't believe there are any seats available. And last I heard just a couple of days ago that it was fully sold out. And then everybody who does that session will be getting a 30-minute consulting call with me on any specific problems that they might be having. Then we're going to be doing the Industry 4.0 and leveraging ChatGPT for Industry 4.0. You should have seen that roll out. Early bird should be going on right now while you're watching this pre-recorded podcast for leveraging ChatGPT for digital transformation. I'll be teaching that on March 23rd. Core MES Bootcamp is March 4th. So for those of you who are doing the final, who did MES Bootcamp, we're putting a bow on that on March 4th, which is a Saturday. And then Advanced MES Bootcamp starts April 29th. Tentatively, the dates for the 3 sessions, it's going to be 3 or 4 right now. We've scheduled 3, April 29th, May 25th, and June 17th. All right. With that, let's bring in Vaughn and Zach while I open my protein shake. Boys, it's good to have you back.
What's up, guys?
What up?
Hey, so why don't we real quick, your mic is a lot better this week, Vaughn. So why don't we give you a second stab at explaining kind of what you're doing at 4.0 Solutions, what you've come back, and what is your role at 4.0, because your mic wasn't working that well in the last podcast.
Yeah, it was terrible. So now that I'm came back to 4.0 Solutions, my new role is going to be as enterprise training specialist. So basically what that entails is Zack and I worked on this project for a client a couple of years ago where we put together an enterprise training package for their, basically they started out wanting to do mastermind and mentorship, and then it turned into, well, hey, can you train our entire workforce? So Zack and I kind of started brainstorming. We laid out the process, kind of got that underway. And basically what it entails is it's going to be a large scale training mechanism for your industry, for your plant. If you want to do your entire enterprise, we can do that. It's fully scalable to whatever size. I mean, we started out doing 10,000 employees, which turned into like 60,000 employees at the end, 5 different languages. But basically what we're doing is, we thought that this would be a great time to really educate the community, because part of what I learned when I was in in the plant floor in manufacturing is there's a large gap between what is known and what is not. Everybody at the executive level knows, hey, we need to transform. We need IoT, Industry 4.0. Those are buzzwords, right? But they have no clue what they mean. How do we do it? How do we get started?
The regular rank and file employee, right? When you get hired, you're hired into a specific job. You have responsibilities that you're given, right? Let's say you're hired as an operator, you're hired as a mechanic, or you're hired as an electrician. Mm-hmm. Your job description says all the things that you're responsible for. Okay. Well, basically, and it's always generic. You couldn't go back to your job description and go, what am I supposed to be doing today? Right. So Absolutely. Then what they do is you go through your standard safety training, right? You go through your normal safety training, you go through your onboarding, and then what do? They put you with some senior person. This person's going to teach you the job. You're going to spend 2 weeks on day shift with this senior person. They're going to teach you the job. Maybe we're going to teach you a couple of different jobs, and then we'll eventually send you to your shift to do your work, right? That's basically how it works. So when you're brand new, your entire focus is, how do I get to where I'm going? What time is my break? What time is my lunch? When does my paycheck show up? Like, there's all these things you're thinking about personally. Then you've got the job that you have to learn. What's one thing that they never talk about? They never talk about the digital strategy. They never talk about the company's vision. They never talk about the company's mission. They never talk about any of the, how do I fit into the bigger piece? Mm-hmm. How do I fit into the bigger piece? And one of the, it's always stood out to me, right? How that's always been missing in onboarding. Well, then take it, the employee that's been there 10, 15, 18, 20 years, they couldn't even, if you asked them, what was your onboarding like? They probably couldn't remember it, right? They've just been there forever now. So then you ask them, okay, when the company gives you training, right? When every year I got to go through my OSHA 8-hour training, or I got to, whatever it is, the training I get from the company, how valuable is that training for you? And everybody's going to say the same fucking thing.
It's garbage.
Garbage. It's useless. They only put me in that room to get my signature. That's it. They want to make sure that I write down on a piece of paper that I went through that training. So that way, if I ever break that rule, they can hold me accountable. Right. I mean, I'm not saying anything here that everyone doesn't already know. When we talk about, and when we're talking about training, we're not talking about another class to get a signature on. What we're talking about is teaching people to change the mindset across the entire organization, from top to bottom, from the boardroom to the rank and file operator on the plant floor. Every single person in the organization. Why do we want to be digital? Why does digital matter? How can we leverage digital to become a better organization? And what does it mean for me? Right? How will my job change? That's what the type of training we do for end users is, right? And so and the only reason we're doing it is because there's a massive need for this. There's a huge need. Now, something I was talking about the other day. There's a lot of people out there. One of the things I think I'm actually going to start asking people is, what are your credentials? Like, what have you accomplished? Because there are a couple of people like on YouTube who do like industry related stuff. I wouldn't say they do industry 4.0. Maybe they do a little bit, but there's a couple of like industry people I see on YouTube who I don't think have ever done a project in there. I don't think they've ever actually had a real job. Like, I don't think that they've ever worked anywhere. And I don't think they've ever done a project for a customer, right? When someone asks me, hey, Walker, why should we listen to you? I would say, well, show me somebody who has touched more pieces in industry than me. I mean, there are people out there, but show me somebody who, I mean, I started on the plant floor shoveling belts. Okay. And I spent the first half of my career working for the end user and plotted a course to learn industry, not in a classroom, but on the plant floor. And everything that we're teaching here is a manifestation of all those things we've learned. You take that first 10 years of my career where I worked in mining, and then I worked in printing, and then I worked in steel, and then tier 1 automotive for the end user. And then you take the next 12, 13 years of my career where I'm a consultant, working for integrators, working for companies like Starbucks and Tesla, and you name the biggest companies in the world, right? And trying to transform those organizations. I really started in digital transformation in 2012, right? And one of the things that became really obvious when Zack and I were working on that big project in 2013, I think it was.
You're kind of a pioneer of this industry.
Yeah, it's like one of the things that stood out was, what? Holy shit, everyone makes the same mistakes. The mistakes that are made are the same.
That's when we realized education is the missing piece, because the technology was there in 2012. But the issue we were running into was the education piece. And Elon Musk says, like, an organization is just a cybernetic collective of humans and machines. And we upgraded the machines, but we didn't upgrade the humans.
Exactly. And by the way, and that's a lot of language we see right now, right? And I think people are getting it. I really do. I think people are getting it. But one of the things I had a great conversation.
The Scrum team, we got it, but the entire organization needs to get it, you know?
Correct. And that starts with education. And by the way, that was the fundamental problem with the Industry 4.0, the EU's Industry 4.0 model. They said it started with computerization. And there was no provision for education in the digital maturity model for Industry 4.0 out of the EU. And what we learned was that digital transformation starts with education. It doesn't start with computerization. Education's the first part. And that's where all this came from, right? With this podcast that we do, right? And what we're going to talk about today. All right, let's talk about this startup thing, okay? So Zack, we had a call. Zack, this was really kind of your idea, right? So let's,
was this my idea?
Well, I mean, you talked about
I did reach out to Josh to come back on the podcast because I wanted to be back in the community, and I love doing this podcast. So let's talk about what we should do. Okay, let's take 5 or 10 minutes. We're going to do a startup, right? We're going to create a company, and we're going to create, what we said is we want to create a product, and we want to create a product that the community can use, right? We want to make sure that we're not using it would be a product that would go to other communities, right? A product that will develop a product and create a company. It'll be a product that the community can use. And when we're all done, we'll just give it away. We'll open source it. We'll commoditize it to get our money back, our investment back. Mm-hmm. But when we're all done, we'll just give the technology away, right? That's what we have not decided what we want to do in terms of. I didn't realize that we were going to develop a technology piece. I thought we were going to do something media related. But
well, maybe it'll be media related. Maybe whatever we do will be novel and it'll have value tied to it, right? Yeah. What I really think we ought to do is I really think we ought to build a solution. And here's why. Here's the reason why. John McKeon and I talk about this all the time. And John McKeon from Galleris solutions in Ireland. He and I have a monthly check-in where we check in for 15, 30 minutes once a month. And we just kind of talk about, hey, you know, John shows me what he's working on. And let me just say something. John and his team at GIS, you need to fucking reach out to him and ask him to show you this. So John has been working. I don't know how much I can share. So I just want to, I don't want to like.
Is it like because I talked to John on the podcast like a year and a half ago or something. Is it kind of an extension of what he was working on then, like his MES 4.0?
All right. So what he's doing is he's creating real-time 3-dimensional visualizations in Unreal Engine.
It's badass.
It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not at all what it.
So it consumes 3D renderings from plant designs. Okay. And then it takes data from the unified namespace and combines the physical structure of a building that comes from the BIMS system. Okay.
Right.
The physical structure of a building and then the behavior of equipment and people to combine them together into Unreal Engine. I mean, it's like being inside of a video game. So imagine you're in a 3-dimensional video game. The world is the plant. Okay. The representation of the world comes from the BIM system. Okay. And then he takes the digital behavior from equipment, things like AGVs, right? And let's say you have a robot on the plant floor and it's moving around on the plant floor. While I'm looking at it on my computer screen as if I'm in a video game, the robot is moving. I can walk through the plant. And it's real. It's real time.
Virtual plant.
It's
virtual reality.
It's a virtual, except you're not wearing a headset. It's at your desktop. It's Unreal Engine. It's
almost like you're playing a game, pretty much.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Now he did something about this like a year ago. Okay. And it was just a quick like prototype thing. Oh, can I take a robot, an AGV or an AMR I've got down in his basement? Can I take the digital data off of that and render it in Unreal Engine? That's what he wanted to do. And he did that. And we showed it to our engineers. We're like, oh, that's fucking cool. You know what I mean? And then he just did the exact same thing, but on a whole other scale. Now he's consuming the literal physical, he's literally consuming the physical reality of the plant and then rendering it digitally. And then he's superimposing all of the equipment, assets, devices, and their real-time values to the point where you can mouse over an Unreal Engine onto a robot, and then it literally plots all of the data inside of the namespace for that robot. So what's the serial number, model number, what's its runtime hours, when's its next PM, that kind of stuff. Really fucking nuts. You know, my point is, if we're going to do a product, we should do something like that. You know what I mean? A solution, right? We should do a solution, whether that solution is a piece of hardware, whether that solution is a piece of software, or whether that solution is code, whatever it is. We should do a solution and document it. Because here's the thing. We need to have a problem we're going to solve. Because if we're going to document a startup, most of our meetings are going to be centered around what's the problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah, what's the most painful problem that we deal with on a day-to-day basis? And if we solve one of our own problems, then that could be a pretty good place to start, you know?
Now, for the community, our plan here is to be 100% transparent. So a 100% behind the scenes look. So there will be no information we won't share. We're literally going to document every meeting, all the good, the bad, the ugly. Okay. And we're going to make that available. Okay. I don't know if we're going to make it available to the whole world, how we're going to do it, if we're going to put it behind a paywall, whatever it'll be. But our plan is to document a startup. And the reason why is this. I get a lot of consulting calls. You know, my consulting rate's really high. It's like $1,200 an hour or something. I mean, it's something crazy. The team has it like at this really high rate, you know.
I don't think that's that high, by the way.
Well, I mean, to me, that seems, I mean, I know why it's that high, because when it was like $600 an hour, you guys had me booked for basically the entire month. And it was like, I didn't do anything but consulting calls. So I know why the rate is as high as it is. And so obviously the market dictates the rate. So, but there are people, I mean, I literally just had a call with a guy who saved up for 3 months to do a 1 hour call with me. And he and I ended up talking for an hour and a half or whatever. Phenomenal dude, fucking brilliant. Right. And a guy that I actually want to work with, you know, but the crux of his conversation with me was, I want to go into business for myself. How can you help me? What do I need to know? Right. One of the things when I started my very first company, there was no information out there for me on like all the things you need to know about creating a systems integration firm, for example. Like, I'm going to be a systems integrator. What do I have to do? So I didn't know anything about errors and omission policies and umbrella policies. And like, I had to, you know, you got to get an accountant, you got to set up your books, you got to incorporate your LLC. Where do you put your articles of incorporation? You know, getting an EIN number, all the things you got to do to start a company. Right. And then, you know, franchise tax, depending upon what state you live in, franchise tax, all these things. Then you want to start hiring people. Like, I had a call the other day. Hey, how do you do the 1099 to W-2 transition? What I was thinking is we would just document all this stuff, document all the things, you know, when do we hire an HR firm? When do you hire a lawyer? When do you do those things? And how do you manage cash flow? Like, giving people the ability to look behind the scenes and see, okay, if I start with $10,000 in the bank and my burn rate is $2,500 a month, I got 4 months of runway. I got to make money in the first 4 months. And ideally, what I'm going to do is make at least $2,500 so I get myself another month, right? All these conversations, I think we should document because I think where our economy improves in the future, if you look in the future here, where our economy is going, right? So only 50% of the people in the world are going to be employable. Okay. So literally, if your IQ is going to be, say, less than 9, you know, the low 90s, you're not going to be employable. Okay. So that means universal basic income. Like, I'm a conservative. I'm a registered Republican. I vote Republican. You know, for the most part, but even I know universal basic income is absolutely going to be a thing we have to do. Right? We need to start talking about it now. Okay. Half the people aren't going to be employable in the future. Okay. So only half are going to work for companies. Okay. Yeah. Many other people are going to have to start their own gigs. And what are they going to be doing? They're going to be doing probably entertainment. That, you know, if you got half the people aren't employed, they're going to have a lot of time on their hands to be entertained. Okay.
Even the window for car detailing is a short window, because the Tesla bot is going to be able to overtake a lot of that labor. And then running companies, you're kind of a marketing engine at that point, you know? So I think content creation is going to continue too. That's what I was thinking. Maybe we did some sort of content creation agency but that's more of a service, not a product, you know?
Like, yeah. I mean,
creation for Industry 4.0.
I think no matter what we do, we need to document the whole thing.
Dude, we should do, crazy idea. But just to put it out there, what if we did like an Industry 4.0 venture capital firm, and we raised a fund to invest in Industry 4.0 startups, which part of that would be like, you know, they can get access to our system. We would definitely bring
Bellotta into that conversation for sure, because that's all Rick does nowadays.
That would be pretty sweet, huh?
Yeah. So those of you who are watching, please comment down below with your ideas. We're going to do this, and we're going to do it. We're probably going to launch next month and start documenting. I've already talked to Vicente, who's our documentary filmmaker. He's one of our digital media guys. He'll be documenting everything. We'll probably incorporate our new entity next month. Here, also, if you're interested in participating, okay, obviously we'd be highly selective on who we would bring into the fold. But if there's somebody out there in the community who's like, you know what, I wouldn't mind being part of a startup like this. Now, a couple of things, we're not going to be paying ourselves. I hate to break the news to people, but when you do a startup, you starve. Okay. So no one gets paid in the beginning. Although when I started my integrator, I got paid. I only went about a month without getting paid. But I went in, generally you should have about 6 months of operating capital to start. You should be able to survive for 6 months, pay your bills at home while you're trying to get a company off the ground. There are a lot of people who do it where they don't got nothing. They got to when we started 4.0 Solutions, we literally had 1 month. We had to be cash flow positive in 4 weeks. Okay. So we had a 4-week window. And we did it. And actually Vaughn and Zack did it. It wasn't me. But if you're interested in participating, comment down below, reach out to us. Obviously, we'd be really selective. Just because you want to participate doesn't mean that we would include you. Like if the synergy's there, let's make it happen. And also, if you have any ideas on what it is you'd like to see us do, like, do you want us to create a piece of hardware? Do you want us to create a piece of software? Do you want us to do a service, a newsletter, or whatever? Some type of media? Let us know down below. Okay. All right, let's get into the questions now. Oh, real quick. All right, let me get this. If you guys haven't been in Discord, okay, I've been a lot more active in Discord lately. There have been some amazing conversations going on in Discord. And the two that I'm going to talk about today are both from the Digital Transformation channel. Okay. And so the second one is a bigger conversation about Schneider and Siemens, but we're going to talk about this first one, which is OPC UA and MQTT. So number one, this guy, and I'm going to leave the people who I know, I'll mention their names because I know they're okay with me mentioning their names. But the guy who asked the actual question, I don't know him. I don't know if he would be okay with me mentioning his name. So anyway, he said, hey, I was doing some Googling, but thought I'd bring it up here. We are in architectural design reviews for Future State, and our MES vendor is pushing OPC UA with our middleware Ignition versus a pub sub architecture via Ignition and HiveMQ. So right now they've got two architectures. One's OPC UA and one is Ignition, or one is MQTT. I'd like some ammo to defend pub sub via OPC UA client server, or I think he means versus. I haven't gotten into the details of why the vendors prefer OPC UA. I'm assuming familiarity. So I just want to have my ducks in a row before I go to battle for pub sub. Are there valid points that OPC UA can be more reliable than MQTT? The answer is no. They're equally reliable. I mean, I wouldn't even say MQTT is more reliable than OPC UA. I would say MQTT probably has a leg up on OPC UA because MQTT is a stateful protocol. So that is, connections have state, and that is, you know that nodes are connected to the infrastructure, because that's part and parcel of how the protocol works. And so whereas OPC UA is has state, but it's done on a heartbeat basis, or a watch clock basis. Number two, there's the best thing to do with your MES vendor is, what you want to do is have an architect who is an industry 4.0 architect talk to that vendor. Okay, here's the reason your MES vendor is pushing OPC UA. It's because it's what they know. Okay. The downsides, there are a significant amount of downsides to going the OPC UA route, especially at the L2 and L3 layer, which what you're talking about here. OPC UA belongs on the edge, level 1 to level 2, and that's it. Doesn't belong anywhere else. But I will go ahead and give you pros and cons. Okay. On the pros side to OPC UA, there are some advantages, and Jeff Noonan pointed this out later on in the thread. But the first one I thought of was OPC methods. So OPC methods within the namespace. So that is, I can if I have an OPC object in the browsable namespace, I can call a method on that object that's native to OPC. That doesn't exist in MQTT. This is why we talk about like MQTT microservice so much that we need MQTT microservice support. While methods and microservices are not the same thing, in microservice support would provide the same functionality that an OPC method provides in OPC UA. But in our experience, OPC methods are used basically never. Okay, so while there's some value there in this architecture, OPC methods aren't going to apply. Okay, where I would say OPC UA would have the leg up is, let's say that your facility is like doing machining, like you're doing CNC or something. Then you could make the argument that OPC information models, because that's machining is basically cookie cutter. Machines are a machine's a machine in a machine shop. Okay. Then you could make the argument that OPC information models would drive value. Okay. Assuming they're using the OPC companion spec for the specific machinery that you have in your facility. If those two things are not, if that's not the case, then there's no reason at all in any way, shape, or form. All the advantages of MQTT, edge-driven, purely edge-driven, pub sub, you need scalability, you need lightweight, and you need fully open. Okay. And MQTT is going to get you all that. The other thing is as you're moving up the stack, you remember OPC UA requires that you open inbound ports to access your OPC servers as you move up the stack. MQTT doesn't. The connections are instantiated from the external node to the broker. The broker never has to be able to instantiate a connection to a device that's informing it. The device establishes the connection to the broker, and then the broker talks back to the device through that connection. Okay. OPC architectures are flipped exactly in the opposite direction. Okay. So when you have an OPC infrastructure, you always have to open inbound ports to access data from those servers. Okay. Richard Shaw said, "This is what I've learned here, but I haven't been able to apply." But he said OPC UA is great on the plant floor up to the SCADA layer because it's much more deterministic. Once you're trying to export data off the floor and into the cloud, the lightweight nature of MQTT is far more scalable. Not to mention Azure and AWS have ways of ingesting MQTT message directly, or if that gets to be too much, you can use Kafka. Now, I want to stop right there. The advantage of MQTT is, the people will complain about this sometimes, is that, MQTT, there's no standard for payloads, right? Unless you're using SparkPlug-B. That's a good thing, because you want your digital infrastructure to be an actual representation of the plant floor. So you have to have a mechanism to transport actual reality, right? And because you have complete flexibility in payloads in MQTT, bless me, thank you. Because you have complete flexibility in the payloads in MQTT, you could put anything you want there in an MQTT payload. But because you have complete flexibility, you can also define any standard or leverage any standard you want to and restrict as much as you want. Okay. But once you restrict, you can't go open. You can't go outside of the bounds of restriction, right? Number two, he says, I'm unaware of any OPC UA server that can scale like MQTT. And for example, HiveMQ just announced that they did 500 million topics. Okay. Now, I can't tell you how enormous that is. Okay. I mean, I've benchmarked 100 million before. Okay. But 100 million with some pretty significant restrictions. Like, that is, no data point was updating more than once per second. I mean, I put some fairly significant restrictions to get to 100 million. Okay. And HiveMQ just announced just the other day that they did 500 million. You can't get anywhere close to 500 million with OPC UA. You can't get to 1 million with OPC UA with a single server. I mean, there's no. I mean, you first off, you're running that in Windows, for example. The amount of memory alone that server's going to consume is, and the compute. I mean, you're going to need more horsepower than you could throw at it. I mean, if I'm being honest with you. So no, OPC UA cannot scale the way MQTT is, not even remotely close. Okay. When you're talking about publishing all of the events potentially across multiple sites globally, KEP server or some other OPC server is definitely not the answer. We're currently working with HiByte as a proof of concept. Assuming that goes well, we're considering using their internal broker at the plant and site level, and then we push all of that up to an enterprise level broker with something like HiveMQ, which is, by the way, what we recommend. I love HiveMQ. I don't like the pricing, but in terms of brokers, EMQX is definitely still my position, an outstanding option, especially once when you take into account Community Edition and stuff. But this new announcements by HiveMQ means that the throughput, I have to redo my benchmarks now. The throughput of HiveMQ has probably exceeded EMQX's. EMQX was about 30% ahead of HiveMQ, but I'll have to redo my benchmarks now, and HiveMQ is probably ahead of EMQX now. All right. And then John replied and he said, excellent. Determinism might be good from PLC SCADA middleware, but for MES, I think our MES vendors want to connect directly to the equipment, so us putting Ignition in HiveMQ gives us more flexibility. Though my biggest concern, and only because I don't know exactly how it's done, is how does a broker, HiveMQ, subscribe and transform the data it's consuming from a middle layer? Well, number one, HiveMQ would not do any of the transformation. HiveMQ is simply the broker. It's gonna have the structure, the state, and a list of all the people who are subscribing to the event. So when an event changes, the subscriber is notified. That's what the broker does. HiveMQ has a whole shitload of other features centered around clustering and load balancing and all that kind of stuff. But you don't do data transformation in the broker itself. Okay. So how does a broker subscribe and transform the data it's consuming from a middle layer? Reads Ignition tags via OPC UA and converts. I do know Ignition has Sparkplug B, but it's built into transmission module, so maybe it's as easy as dropping into that module. Yes. So what happens is, in this case, if I'm using Ignition and HiveMQ, and let's say Ignition is talking over OPC UA to, say, a KEP server on the plant floor, I'm going to be able to drag those tags, drop them into a tag namespace inside of Ignition, and then I install the transmission module, and then I set up a transmitter where I go to the top level of those tags, and I say, I want you to go to this path, and I want you to transmit any event inside here to this broker up here. And then on the broker side, it's now an MQTT topical namespace being transmitted over Sparkplug B. So the Ignition becomes a node, a device, and it is transmitted up to the higher level broker. And then one last thing Jeff Noonan chimed in here. I wanted to make sure I concluded this. In my opinion, the advantages of OPC UA over MQTT, so basic MQTT, not Sparkplug, are simply string typing. MQTT payloads are not forced to conform to a schema. That's a good thing. Jeff and I would disagree. Jeff certainly doesn't think. Jeff probably believes that you should enforce schemas. I do not. I think in the enforcement of schemas are not important. Support for schemas is, but the enforcement is not important. Okay. You want to be able to send a jumbled mess if you want to. Okay. So when integrating systems, you need to consider how to make sure the publisher and subscriber expect the same payload structure. The point is you enforce a schema. So, and I think what Jeff's pointing out here is, by default, there is no enforcement of the schema. Okay. So you need to know that if the payload structure is a language, then the consumer of that payload needs to be able to speak it. Okay. Sparkplug B addresses this to a level, but it introduces a bunch of new headaches, specifically around device centric. There's you get advantages of Sparkplug B, but there's the fundamental issue with Sparkplug B is the fact that it's device centric. It really should be instrument centric, in my opinion. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. But that being said, it's still the best out there. The other benefits of OPCU over MQTT are OPC UA methods, which I agree with, and the ability to retrieve history. You can retrieve history using SparkPlug-B. Using SparkPlug-B with store and forward, you can transmit historical events in the correct order, but there's no support for history in MQTT because MQTT is merely, for all intents and purposes, an event engine. All of these can be addressed with MQTT, though. The next question may just be native support. If the systems your company has selected have native support for OPC UA and not MQTT, it'd be hard to justify the expense of moving it over. All right. That was a good thought. Any chime in?
Yeah. What about the unified analytics framework?
So UAF, which, by the way, I still need to reply to Nepper on that. He sent me a thing asking for my secondary feedback. So
you should do a video.
Yeah, I should. But I need
to. It makes sense what he's talking about. It's kind of like, it's like the next level of integrating the historical and analytics piece using the UNS.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, like what we're talking about, Jeff Nepper, who has recently gone to Flow, he's now a partner at Flow Software. They are building a new platform. So Flow, the intelligence platform that they have that we've been huge fans of because there's a couple of native features that I just think are awesome. Social media integration and predictive analytics on time series data. So you basically take a sample in the past, last 4 hours, and natively you can predict what the next 4 hours should look like based on how the last 4 hours looked. Just using standard linear regression, which but it's a feature you just don't see in analytics platforms very often, which I'm not sure why. So what they're doing is they are building a framework outside of Flow. So Flow, as you know it, will actually run inside of this framework. Okay. So if you already have Flow, it'll be backwards compatible. Eventually, when they come up with the major release of this new framework, and I can't remember the name of it, Flow will just run inside of it. Similar to like when Aviva created System Platform. So when Wonderware created System Platform, they used to have Wonderware InTouch, which was standalone. And then when they came out with System Platform, which I think was version 10, and Rick Bellotta can answer that question, but I'm pretty sure it was 10. When version 10 came out of System Platform, InTouch ran inside of System Platform. Okay.
That was crazy.
Right. And so you used to have InTouch as a separate software, and then it was actually essentially a module inside this framework. That's what Flow is doing. They're building a framework. Well, one of the things that they're doing is they want to create this unified analytics framework, which is basically they want to be able to connect a framework of features, think of a squares, each with different features, and plug into any unified namespace, and you would be able to get the functions from those features. Okay. And primarily centered around data analysis. Okay. So I think it is a wonderful idea. There were two things that popped out of my head, which was it's kind of important that the guys at Flow know where the folks at MQTT and Sparkplug working group are going with their specification, because any decisions that's made by the MQTT group or the Sparkplug working group is going to directly impact this UAF when they develop it. So, but I do love the idea.
Oh, dude, we should just do a conference company. That's what we should do. We should just do a conference.
Where we just do conferences?
Yeah, like the company is just we do events or something, you know?
Well, someone asked me.
We have like this giant email list or something, you know?
Someone had asked me the question, and I went over this in the last podcast, but it was like, why are you hard on people in the industry, or, you know what I mean? And the reason why is, it's the same reason I'm a big fan of Rick Bellotta, right? Rick is a troll on LinkedIn. He gets in lots of arguments all the time. On Discord, he gets into arguments. He's constantly picking fights. He calls himself the bullshit artist. You know what I mean? If you've ever engaged with Rick on LinkedIn, you know he gets into lots of arguments with people. Okay. Rick and I have never been in an argument. And I'm probably the most disagreeable human being on the planet. And he's probably as disagreeable as I am. Why is it we never fight? Because we don't agree on everything from a technical perspective. We probably agree on, let's say, 80%. But we don't agree. There's a 20% we could argue over. Why is it we don't ever argue? And the answer is, Rick is a contrarian. Like people who are contrarians, who are calling out, we're going to talk about marketing here in a second. I think experts in our field who have fuck you money need to be the people who shine flashlights on what it is big companies are doing so that everyone else understands what's going on. Okay. The Good Old Boy Club is real. Okay. The Grease and Palms is real. Okay. We all see it with our own eyes. Rick calls that stuff out. When Microsoft did their big layoffs, he fucking, this is ridiculous. The optics here are terrible. When Eric Barnstedt and Microsoft got their patent for OPC UA Part 14, Rick was the only person who went on Eric Barnstedt's LinkedIn and said, hey, this so much for open and interoperable, and when somebody asked Eric Barnstedt, hey, well, what does this mean? Like, what are the implications for us? Now that you have this patent, what are the implications for the community? You know what Eric Barnstedt's response was? I'm not a lawyer. I can't give legal advice. And I thought, what a fucking douche. I literally thought, what a fucking douche. You know full well what it is you were hoping to achieve by filing for the patent. You fucking dick.
Explain it. Though they want to make Pub Sub like a patented, or
no? They want to be able to file it. They want to be able to leverage a claim if they need to. Okay, so the truth is that patents in software is a real murky space. Okay, for the most part, it's really hard to prove patent violation in software. Okay,
you could skin the same cat a dozen different ways.
Right, it's really, really hard. So most of the time, when you get awarded a software patent, if it ever went to trial, this is the reason that when Schneider and Tatsoft they sued they sued when Mark Taccolini sold Indusoft to Schneider. Okay, it wasn't just him; it was his partners. They sold to Schneider. Schneider ended up suing Mark Taccolini when he created Tatsoft, and then Mark
it wasn't based on anything,
right? And then Mark countersued. Mark ended up winning. Schneider ended up having to pay out Tatsoft. It's in software. It's really hard to enforce these patents.
It's just a weapon,
right? It's a weapon because you have to spend money to defend yourself,
and no one has more money than Microsoft.
Right. So if Microsoft can spend tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in litigation, if they believe that even if they believe just getting you to go bankrupt is all I don't need to win in court. I just need you to run out of money before we get to court. And so that's what this kind of stuff is centered around. Okay.
What would be the end game there? Just a cease and desist order, or
no, the end game would be let's say you try to go do something fancy with PubSub, OPC PubSub. Now in there, we weren't going to talk about this patent, but if you look at Microsoft's the patent filing, they're basically trying to patent certain architectures using Part 14 PubSub. In a nutshell, you can read the full patent, but you just go to Google, go to Eric Barnstedt's page, right? His LinkedIn page, here's the other thing. Another thing about Eric that I think is really, he sets up his LinkedIn so that I think only people who are connected to him can comment in his LinkedIn. Even though he's a public figure, he's very well known in digital transformation. It's like that's coward shit. Now I get to say that. You know why? Because I'm rich. Eric can't hurt me in any way, shape, or form. Like, he wouldn't be able to twist, he wouldn't be able to manipulate a situation that's going to hurt me or hurt one of my companies or whatever, like, he can't hurt me. So I have a responsibility to point that out, but let's say you're somebody who works for a company that's got a close relationship with Microsoft, and you publicly are saying, hey, it's kind of fucked up. Why did you guys file for this patent? And then why didn't you just answer the questions when someone asked you? You're the one who celebrated the fact that you were awarded this patent. Then somebody asked you a question about the patent, and then you gave the fucking douche answer. I'm not a lawyer, can't give legal advice. You knew full well what you were hoping your claims would be when you filed for the fucking patent. But I'm doing that to shed light in the industry on why it is companies would do something like that. Why is it Microsoft is part of the OPC Foundation, which is supposed to be open interoperability in industry, and then Microsoft goes and patents, files for a patent with Eric Barnstedt over a specific type of implementation of Part 14. Then when the person who's awarded the patent is asked questions about, well, what is it you hope to have claims against? He says, I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice. You fucking know full well what claims you hope to have against that architecture. What protection you hope to have. Otherwise, you wouldn't have filed for the patent. All right, let's do this last comment. By the way, I had no intentions of talking about that here. So let's talk about a large OEM that I actually think is doing it right. Okay. All right. So within the Discord server and the digital transformation channel, a guy who works for Schneider Electric finally, he came in and he watched the video. Siemens still has a long way to go, and he wanted to ask me some questions about my position. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just say his name because you're going to be able to see it. Hopefully, Mark, he doesn't have a problem with this. In fact, we'll get confirmation that he's okay with his name being broadcast. If not, we'll have Josh edit it out. Josh, do me a favor. Reach out to Mark, and I'm going to use his name here, but reach out to him and just get confirmation that he's okay with it. Otherwise, edit it out before we publish this. All right. So Mark said, right. So I checked with Joshua Stover, and I was advised that this is the right channel to post the following very long post. Please bear with me. He said, hi, for the first time, this is my first time posting in Discord, but I have been following 4.0 Solutions on YouTube for a while. I want to ventilate Walker's comments on last month's podcast video entitled Siemens Has a Long Way to Go. Specifically, I want to explore the comment he made about Schneider Electric. And for those of you who don't know, what I said was Siemens is even more focused on interoperability than even Schneider. I think that's what my language was. Okay. He said, I worked for Schneider for just over 8 years. The first 4 years, I was a projects engineer executing PLC SCADA projects in a typical 3.0 way. Now I'm a pre-sales technical consultant. My job is to help our customers find the best fit solutions for their projects. Obviously, what I propose is made up of Schneider's products, but I am not shy to include third-party products in my solutions. When Schneider has no equivalent option, or when I know that the Schneider option is inferior. That being said, my experience is largely around motor control, PLC, HMI SCADA, and Ethernet networks. When it comes to full stack integration and the software that live higher up in the stack, I'm a total noob. All right, I'm going to pause right here. That's all good things. Okay. If he's a sales consultant for Schneider, and Schneider has a product that is a best-in-class product, and he's selling solutions. So he's not saying, I'm here to sell you Schneider. I'm here to sell you an overall solution that may or may not include Schneider. Okay. Then it is wholly appropriate to consider any Schneider product when developing your solution. The standard, though, needs to be that I'm going to build best in class. Okay, but who decides what the best in class is? Right, that's the real question. All right, let me go back over here. He said, slight caveat before I continue. I am not mandated by Schneider Electric to represent them on this forum. So please don't take my words here as an official statement from Schneider. Of course, we would never do that. Rather, my views are my own based on the experience I've had working at Schneider. Walker has also said in his videos that he repeatedly invites anyone from big OEMs to come and defend themselves on the podcast. And obviously, Mark, you are invited to come on the podcast and speak, your own words, but about your experience with Schneider. A live debate with Walker is a bit of a scary prospect. I'm not such an eloquent speaker, but I'm willing to stick my neck out here on Discord. Maybe I get some backlash from Schneider speaking out of turn, but I'm willing to risk it. Now on to Walker's comments in the video. Video entitled Siemens Has a Long Way to Go. At around 6 minutes, Walker says, quote, Siemens has accepted that they are never going to have 100% coverage in an organization and that there has to be mechanisms to easily integrate third-party non-Siemens partners into a Siemens infrastructure. That is not Rockwell's philosophy. It is also not Schneider's philosophy, weirdly enough, and I'm not sure why. Yep, that's what I said. As the Michael Jordan meme goes, I took that personally. Okay. He said, I take exception with the view that Schneider and Aviva's philosophy is to force our customers to only use our products. I wouldn't go so far as say force. Okay. But I understand that that's how it's being interpreted. I would not use the word force. What I would say is there's a huge difference between force and steer. It's the difference between telling a direct lie and lying by omission. Okay. So steering is lying by omission and forcing is lying directly. Okay. They're metaphorically speaking. EcoStruxure is marketed as being open and interoperable. One of the guiding principles at Schneider is that our products only use industry standard open protocols. In all the sales training I've had at Schneider, the underlying theme was consultative selling. Yep, which is a good thing. Help the customer find the best solution. I have never heard of an approach from any of my colleagues that tries to ensnare end users in our ecosystem. I've never heard of anyone trying to convince a customer that they have to replace or avoid someone else's product at one layer in order to gain access to our products on another layer. By the way, I've never said Schneider does that. I have said Rockwell does that. I have never said that Schneider does that. Okay. While you might hold the view that Schneider's implementation of an open and interoperable stack is not the best in the world, saying that our philosophy is one that tries to lock users into our ecosystem is patently false. If that's what I said, I apologize. That is definitely not what I meant to say. Okay. What I meant to say is that their philosophy isn't, in fact, interoperable. That doesn't mean that that Schneider doesn't take an open and interoperable approach based on certain integrations. But if you look at the EcoStruxure diagram, which, by the way, there are two diagrams that I generally operate off of when I'm talking about EcoStruxure, which is EcoStruxure is to Schneider as factory talk is to Rockwell. Okay. So that would be EcoStruxure is basically the framework. So if you were to do AWS, Amazon Web Services, EcoStruxure would be to what to Schneider as AWS is to Amazon Cloud. Okay. All right. EcoStruxure, there's a stack diagram. Okay. That I put in the Discord to say, hey, this is one of the issues I have. If you were to look up, go ahead and look up Siemens IoT stack. Okay. So if you look up the Siemens IoT stack, what you're going to get is industrial automation, industrial edge, you're going to get MindSphere, and you're going to get Mendix. Okay. And you're going to get a 4-layer stack that are all connected on one side through native Siemens protocols in hub and spoke, and on the other side through open protocols like MQTT on the other side. Okay. OPC UA, MQTT. But if you look at the EcoStruxure stack, and he does point this out, you may have an objection to the way Schneider's Schneider built EcoStruxure, and I do. I like the EcoStruxure ecosystem, by the way. But if you take a look, they have a 4-layer stack, okay? They have connected products, they have edge control, they have apps and analytical services, and then they have building, data center, industry, and grid across the top. Those are basically the business verticals, okay? The difference between the Siemens stack and the EcoStruxure stack is that the EcoStruxure is linear integration between those layers, okay? So what they have is point-to-point integration up and down each of those layers. Okay, so if you look up EcoStruxure, stack, and you can see what I'm talking about. That was all I was talking about. When I was saying, interestingly enough, Schneider their philosophy isn't as open as Schneider or Siemens. That's what I meant. Okay. One other thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a little more nuanced. But...
Right. The single greatest conversion. Schneider owns Aviva. Okay. Schneider owns Indusoft. Okay. Indusoft is now what you know as Aviva Edge. Okay. Aviva Edge is the old Indusoft software. Okay. Aviva, the number one conversion in the world, platform conversion, is from Wonderware, from the Aviva solutions to Ignition. And it has been for like 12 straight years. Why do you think that is? It's really 2 reasons. Okay. Number one, it's financial. It's like you're literally saving, especially depending upon the size you are as an organization. You go from like $300,000 a year in licensing down to, $15,000, right? I mean, there's a huge financial incentive, but the bigger one, it's time to value because of the open architecture of Ignition, fully open, not just industrial standards. Not just industrial standard. Ignition was the first platform that
web standards,
right, that went open based on web standards, IT infrastructure. And if you're going to be doing IIoT conversion or convergence, right? All right. And then I want to finish. I want to make sure I get all of Mark's statements in here. So he said, I will admit that our adoption of MQTT and more specifically Sparkplug has been slow, but it hasn't been zero either. I agree. And I've talked to people at Schneider and I've been happy. In fact, I think Aviva specifically, but I think that Schneider has done a much better job in the last 12 to 18 months, but the market drove that. That's not leading. You're not a leader when all you're doing is reacting to hemorrhaging revenues. Okay. MQTT Sparkplug is supported by EcoStruxure Geo, EcoStruxure Machine, Aviva System Platform, Aviva Edge. And at the end of Q1 this year, Schneider is releasing the SCADA Pack 47XI controller, which, by the way, I'm very excited about. This is an IEC 61131 DNP3 RTU and Linux Edge computing device. The problem is the price point, based on how much who I've talked to, is going to be way too high. Okay. But a Lineage Edge computing device, which is going to support Sparkplug via the EcoStruxure RTU Operation Expert software and through third-party apps on the Linux operating system. This is probably the most exciting product that Schneider has coming out, by the way, and I'm glad Mark pointed it out.
It kind of has PLC Next vibes.
Well, it's got PLC Next and Groove Epic vibes about it, R&D of the Modicon M580 pack have told me that towards the end of this year, they hope to release an in-rack edge computing module, which will also support MQTT. And for years, we've had a range of Linux and Windows-based edge computing products that can be used as MQTT gateways. Yes. You'll notice that when I generally put Rockwell at the top of the pack of those who are most egregious, and Schneider's most of the time and also ran. Okay. And that's what I mean. Schneider's doing a lot of things right. Okay. I mean, I'm glad Mark came out here. I really do. And I want to encourage you guys to go onto the Discord server in the digital transformation channel and read the rest of his comments, because he represented Schneider very, very well. I want to point something out here, though. Brian Pryby, who is a business owner like myself, he's a systems integrator. This was Brian's comment. He said, at Rockwell and at Siemens, take note. This is the type of participation we want from the large OEMs. I believe the reason why the community, more specifically Walker, has a negative view is because of associations with the other large OEMs and zero attempt to discern themselves and state it to the community. Marketing can publicly say whatever they want, open, bleeding edge, IIoT, but nobody gives a shit because marketing inherently lies. Now, Ian Scarrett later on gets offended by it, and he says marketing inherently lies is a bit harsh, speaking as a marketing professional. Listen, marketing is nothing but lying, guys. Hate to break the news to you. Whether you're telling direct lies or whether you're lying by omission. And let me pick on inductive automation here, okay? I'll pick on inductive automation. We talked about this in Mastermind in the last session. For years, inductive automation, their mobile module was garbage. And their historian, garbage. Okay? Now, what they would say, until they came out with perspective, they would never openly admit publicly that the mobile module was garbage. And if you tried to say it publicly, they would take offense to it. They'd get mad at people who brought it up at ICC. It was garbage. They would try to put lipstick on a pig. They would try to, you know, they try to put the most positive spin that they could on it. But what they should have been saying is, don't use our mobile module. It is garbage. You will be disappointed with it. That is an example of marketing lying. Marketing would say, no, you know what? We'll let other people point out the flaws. We will never talk about our own flaws. Okay, we're never going to talk about our own. That's what marketing people say. Marketing people will say, it's not our responsibility to tell you why you shouldn't use us. I disagree. If you're acting like an expert, if you're pretending to be if you're putting yourself out there as an expert, you have a responsibility. Okay. All right. Last thing, we're over, but I wanted to, and then Ricardo said, oh, wait, hold on. And then Brian Pryby finishes his statement. He says, for the 2 years I've been a part of this community, this is the first time Schneider or Rockwell or Siemens has stood up for themselves. Even more impressive, it came from one of their project engineers, someone who actually implements their products. What Mark Pittout here did is what companies need to be doing more of. What Mark did was he came in and he basically laid out the facts. Now, and he gave me an opportunity to clarify what I actually meant, which is if you take the way the approach Siemens has taken with the 4-layer stack and basically blocks on either side for interoperability, and then you take the way the EcoStruxure environment is constructed, and you can look at Schneider's own architectural diagrams for this, you will see what we mean. Okay, the layers are integrated they're linear layers. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, that doesn't promote interoperability. Okay. And Ricardo Carvalho, he's the director of digital transformation in a huge initiative in Europe. He said, I second Brian's view. I'm very impressed by Mark's courage and openness to discuss his employer's advantages and shortcomings in such a direct way. Schneider should be thankful for such engagement with the community, and we should all welcome this discussion. I, for one, am very interested in going deeper on this, as my company does use Schneider and other major OEMs, and we are going to start our UNS journey pretty soon. Look at that. Not only that, Mark got a potential lead by telling the truth, by engaging and telling the truth. Look how that fucking works. Look how that works. The OEMs don't understand, like, you don't understand how far you get by Mark saying, listen, I acknowledge our adoption to MQTT has been slow. But boom, 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 boom. Here's the solution, right? Yes, the whole industry would be better off with more people like him. So I do want to open an invitation to Mark come on the podcast. Listen, let me clarify. My statement centered around Schneider was really just meant about if I was going to point out the two architectures, which was more of the philosophical discussion. Okay. Do I believe that I would love to know more about Schneider's consultative approach to solutions. I would love to know more about that. And I'd love to promote it if it's in fact the truth. Okay. All right. With that, like, subscribe, comment down below. Remember, please put the comments down below about what type of product you'd like to see us develop. We will see you guys in 2 more weeks. It will be a live podcast in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching. I know the awkwardness of the pre-recorded podcast isn't nearly as cool as the engagement. Zach, Vaughn, thanks for joining. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
You got it, brother.
Peace out, word.